We have now reached a moment at which we can begin to know something of the process of this phony and crooked disease and the pathway we are following. At present, I don't think there are very many of us. A few thousand maybe. But this is a very extraordinary epoch, in which this knowledge is now becoming a part of the thinking of quite a lot of people. Thank God, said Gregory Bateson in one of his final speeches, titled Paradigmatic Conservatism. I developed this hypothesis, which I call the charmed loop of didactic incitement, as an elaboration on Bateson's double-bind hypothesis. I believe that it is at least a component or aspect of what he was talking about in that statement, specifically where he says, "We are beginning to know something of the process of this phony and crooked disease in the pathway we are following." I believe he is alluding to a process, a kind of mechanism, metaphorically speaking, or an abuse and exploitation under a phony rubric of teaching or lesson giving, facilitate quantification of interests accruing to perpetrators, overcoming the borders and boundaries of the victims, while the qualitative niche ecological differences of victims are ground down, any recourse they might take apparently justifying the abuse. Bateson culminates his epic studies with a question: as teachers, are we wise? I believe didactic incitement is a predictable strategy of liberal internationalists, taking for granted the legitimacy of their incitement to a phony universal maturity, so long as contextual force is strong enough to hold in place their interests over the victims. They can apply this for a steady increase and maximization of their interests at the expense of the victims, like stepping on a lever, a mechanism, as it were, that continually overcomes their pattern boundaries, has them continually pay up, so to speak, with the resources and warrant, continually reconstructing a resource to the perpetrator, to the continued exploitation, abuse, diminishment, and expense of the unfortunately positioned victims, who desperately try to protect and conserve their sovereignty and native resource from this abuse. Bateson added, the road to hell can be paved with bad intentions as well. He would have also said, it isn't funny. I propose the charmed loop of didactic incitement as a useful elaboration on Bateson's double-bind theory. The double-bind proposed by Bateson toward a theory of schizophrenia entails: one, a preliminary paradoxic injunction, such as "I am a liar," or "disobey me," or "be spontaneous." Two, a prohibition of metacommunication, prohibiting talk about talk that might clarify the confusion, secure and confirm the status, particularly on an important relationship level, for the would-be victim. And three, a tertiary reframing which prevents escape from the circumstance. For example, a child as dependent upon their parents cannot easily escape the field and is therefore confronted with an intolerable choice between protecting their capacity for sensible judgment or the relationship. As mammals, relationships are profoundly important, and they begin to manifest communicological pathologies in a futile attempt to protect the necessary resource of their faculties, as one cannot not communicate, while the other option, to abandon the relationship, is not available or acceptable either. There's no apparent way out, as one proves that the cruelty of the didactic incitement is justified no matter what recourse taken. Didactic incitement, that is to say, abuse under the rubric of teaching and making one tough, particularly if it is overdone and there is enough contextual force over the victim to keep them from escaping the field, can create a reflexively recursive phenomenon of a pernicious charmed loop. No matter what avenue of escape the victim chooses, they will lose and only add to the warrant of the perpetrator's recursively accruing interests. The charmed loop of didactic incitement. There are some infamous command paradoxes in psychology. Paradoxic command paradoxes in psychology. I am a liar, be spontaneous, disobey me. I would add be a man would seem to be yet another form, as one is taking orders is not really in power, not really the man, are they? I would like to submit the hypothesis that when one is not in a sufficiently powerful position, that they are susceptible to a charmed loop of didactic incitement. Unlike the classic paradox, paradoxia, two phases, this one seems split four-way and may more characteristically unfold over time. Nevertheless, there is no apparent way out, as one proves that the abuse of didactic incitement is justified no matter what recourse taken. There are four apparent options. One is a wimp if they do nothing in response. The abuse is justified as one proves their own ineffectiveness. Two, one is a pig if they respond by fighting back directly. One justifies the abuse as they reveal their primitive self-interest and lack of restraint. Three, a dupe if they try to reason and bargain with the inciter. One justifies the abuse, and in this case, they risk the hideous result of sharing the best that they have with the persons treating them the worst. Forms of having the 10 taken in the prisoner's dilemma scenario come into play with that option. And four, a permanent puerile initiate. The instigators, others, can always treat the abuse as a lesson, and one may be left with little choice but to treat the didactic incitement as an experience not that bad at worst, or even a necessary lesson, thereby justifying the abuse, in this case also, hence the charmed loop of didactic incitement. I'd like to give the readership a clue. It is probably not an impossible situation for the victim in most cases, at least not if granted some time and capacity to connect with sympathetic people in recourse. The perpetrators have to have a quanta of power to hold enough contextual force over the victims. However, that is a benefit to posting on a thread that takes comments. Neither am I pretending to have all the answers. Rather, adjustments and insights are welcome. And so I would like to conclude. As teachers, are we wise?